screaming. They thought they were untouchable, clinking glasses in the VIP section while I sat in the shadows. But they forgot who paid for the champagne. They forgot who paved the road they were standing on. And most importantly, they forgot that I don't get mad. I get even. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The timeline rewinds to 45 minutes earlier. I pulled up to the Obsidian Lounge in my sedan. The valet looked past me, scanning for Ferraris and G-Wagons until I handed him a $100 bill. That was the first sign. In this world, you are either the show or the wallet. I had always been the wallet. The Obsidian Lounge was the kind of place that prided itself on being impossible to find. Underground, unmarked, darker than a cave inside. This was my sister Brittany's playground. Tonight was her influencer brand launch, a vanity project I had quietly funded to keep my parents off my back about supporting the family dream. I walked toward the velvet rope. The bouncer, a man the size of a shipping container, checked his list. He frowned. He didn't see Savannah, CEO of Apex Logistics. He saw Savannah +1. He waved me through, but pointed not toward the main floor, but toward a side corridor. I assumed it was a mistake. I assumed he didn't know that without me, the rent for this venue wouldn't have cleared the bank. Then I saw my mother, Susan. She wasn't waiting to greet me. She was waiting to intercept me. She stepped out of the shadows like a border patrol agent, blocking my view of the main VIP booths where Tyler and Brittany were holding court. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my blazer. It was tailored, professional, expensive. But to her, it was a uniform. "You're here," she said, her voice tight. "And you're wearing that." We talked about the aesthetic, Savannah. This is high-flash photography. We need cohesion. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how my 80-hour work week had gone. She grabbed my elbow and steered me away from the flashing lights down the service corridor past the kitchen swinging doors. There, tucked into an alcove next to the coat check station, was a metal folding table. No tablecloth. One chair. It was the kind of table you set up for a vendor or a temporary hire. "We're just so tight on space in the main booth," she said, not even bothering to make the lie convincing. "And honestly, you just look out of place in the photos. This is better. You can watch from here. Just try not to draw attention to yourself." I stared at the metal chair. In any other context, in any business meeting or negotiation, I would have laughed and walked out. But I didn't. I almost sat down. And that is the most dangerous part of growing up in a family like mine. You see, cruelty doesn't feel like cruelty when it's your native language. It feels like gravity. For 29 years, I had been trained to accept the scraps. I had been conditioned to believe that my utility was the only rent I could pay for their love. This is the trap of normalized cruelty. It rewires your survival instincts. It tells you that sitting at a folding table in the dark is better than being exiled into the cold. It convinces you that being invisible is a form of safety. I looked at my mother's back as she rushed toward the VIP section to fix Brittany's hair. She didn't look back. She didn't worry that I would leave. She was banking on my conditioning. She was betting on the fact that Savannah always stays, Savannah always pays, Savannah always accepts the corner. I pulled out the metal chair. It scraped loudly against the concrete floor. I sat down, but as the cold metal touched my back, the conditioning snapped. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a silent internal realignment. I looked at the coat check girl who was staring at me with pity. I didn't want her pity. I realized then that I wasn't a guest at this party. I wasn't family. I was infrastructure. And infrastructure can be shut down. To understand the magnitude of what I was about to do, you have to understand what was happening outside the walls of the Obsidian Lounge. While Tyler was toasting to his genius with $40 cocktails 60 miles away at the port, a fleet of 48 semi-trucks was idling. They were branded with the logo of my company, Apex Logistics. Inside those trucks sat $6.1 million worth of inventory. Tyler's revolutionary new tech hardware, scheduled to hit shelves nationwide at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. This launch was his entire life. It was the golden ticket my parents were banking on for their retirement. It was the funding source for Brittany's endless vanity projects, and I was the only reason it was happening. When other shipping companies laughed at his timeline and his budget, I stepped in. I pulled strings. I called in favors I had spent 10 years earning. I absorbed the overtime costs. I personally oversaw the routing to ensure not a single unit was late. I wasn't just his fiancé. I was his supply chain. I was the invisible engine that kept their shiny, expensive lives moving forward. I looked across the room at my father, Robert. He was laughing at something Tyler said, clapping him on the back. 2 years ago, when he made bad investments that nearly cost them their house, I was the one who wired the funds to bail him out. I didn't ask for a thank you. I didn't ask for a plaque on the wall. I just did it because that is what the engine does. It works. It hums. It keeps the lights on so the stars can shine. But tonight, looking at them from my folding table in the dark, I realized I had made a critical calculation error. I thought I was their partner. In reality, I was their utility. You don't thank the electricity. You only notice it when it cuts out. The realization didn't make me cry. It clarified things. It stripped away the emotional fog and left only the cold, hard lines of a business decision. If they treated me like a servant, it was because I had allowed them to believe my services were free. That ended now. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my work phone. It was a secure device, encrypted, linked directly to the central dispatch system of Apex Logistics. I ignored Tyler's laughter and my mother's glare. My focus narrowed entirely to the fleet management interface. The screen showed the fleet status ready for departure. The drivers were waiting for the final digital signature to roll out. My thumb hovered over the override command. This wasn't a tantrum. This was a breach of contract termination. Tyler had violated the unwritten clause of our partnership, mutual respect. And in my world, when you violate the contract, you lose the cargo. Hesitation creates bottlenecks. I executed the command. I typed in my authorization code. The screen flashed red. Status updated, locked, grounded, return to base. I typed one text message to my VP of operations, knowing he was monitoring the launch board. Kill it. Turn the trucks around. Breach of character. Do it now. I pressed send. The phone vibrated once, a small, silent confirmation. The engine had stopped. Now I just had to wait for the lights to go out. It took exactly 90 seconds for the shockwave to travel from the port to the Obsidian Lounge. I watched Tyler pull his phone from his jacket pocket, annoyed at the interruption. He glanced at the screen, expecting a congratulatory text or a stock update. Instead, his brow furrowed. He tapped the screen aggressively, swiping refresh as if he could scrub away the reality staring back at him. Then he looked up. His eyes scanned the room, bypassing his investors, his friends, his adoring fans, until they locked onto me in the shadows. He didn't look worried. He looked furious. He stormed across the room, weaving through the dancers, his face a mask of indignation. My mother and Brittany followed him, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. Tyler stopped in front of my folding table, looming over me. "What did you do?" he hissed, keeping his voice low to avoid a scene. "I just got a notification. The fleet is grounded. The system says administrative lock. Fix it. Now." He bypassed why completely. In his mind, I wasn't a partner with a grievance. I was a malfunctioning server that needed a reboot. I looked up at him, my expression blank. "It's not a glitch, Tyler," I said, my voice calm enough to cut glass. I revoked the clearance. The trucks aren't moving. "Are you insane?" Brittany chimed in, her voice shrill. "This is my launch party, Savannah. You're ruining the vibe because you're jealous that I'm in the VIP booth and you're back here with the coats. It's pathetic." "Lower your voice," my mother snapped, glaring at me. "You are embarrassing this family. Fix the shipping, apologize to Tyler, and maybe we can discuss letting you sit at the main table for dessert. Stop acting hysterical." Hysterical. That was their favorite word for any woman who refused to be convenient. Arguments are inefficient. I placed my phone on the metal table and pressed the speaker button. "Ben," I said clearly, "you're on speaker." My VP of Operations voice filled the small alcove, crisp and professional. "Go ahead, Savannah." "Terminate the Brooks Technology contract immediately," I said, looking Tyler dead in the eye. "Cite the character clause. Irreconcilable breakdown of trust. Effective immediately." "Copy that," Ben replied. "Contract voided. Fleet is returning to base." "You can't do that," Tyler screamed, forgetting to whisper. "We have a deal. You can't just cancel $6 million worth of logistics because your feelings are hurt." "I just did," I replied. Before he could lunge, a shadow fell over the table. The crowd parted not for Tyler, but for a man walking with the kind of quiet authority that makes room noises cease. It was Marcus, the legendary venture capitalist who had put the seed money into Tyler's company. He walked right past Tyler. He didn't even look at my mother. He stopped in front of my folding table. "Savannah," Marcus said, his voice warm and confused. He extended a hand, ignoring the coat check tickets fluttering nearby. "I was looking for you in the VIP section. Why is the Queen of Supply Chain sitting in the dark?" The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tyler looked like he had swallowed glass. Just handling some last-minute adjustments, Marcus, I said, shaking his hand without standing up. Well, Marcus said, turning to look at Tyler with cold, flat eyes. I hope you treated her well tonight, son. You do realize Apex Logistics is the only reason my firm backed your hardware, right? We invest in infrastructure, not ideas. And she is the best infrastructure in the game. The color drained from Tyler's face so fast he looked like a ghost. The narrative they had built that I was the charity case, the invisible sister, the lucky fiancé, had just been dismantled in 3 sentences. Marcus looked at the folding table, then back at me. This isn't a seat for a partner, he said quietly. It looks more like a seat for a servant. Tyler looked like a trapped animal. His eyes darted from Marcus's disappointed face to the fleet status notification on his phone, then back to me. He needed a lifeline. He needed to prove to his biggest investor that this was just a lover's quarrel, a misunderstanding, and not the systemic devaluation of his most critical business partner. He forced a smile that looked more like a rictus of pain. Marcus, you have it all wrong, he stammered, his voice rising an octave. We adore Savannah. She hates the spotlight, that's all. We gave her this private table so she could relax. Look, I even bought her a gift. He lunged toward the end of the metal table where a small flat box wrapped in silver paper sat ignored next to my clutch. He grabbed it and shoved it toward me, his hands shaking. Open it, Savannah, he urged, a desperate edge creeping into his tone. Show Marcus how much we care about you. It's for our future. I looked at the box. It was heavy, flat, the size of a jewelry case for a necklace or perhaps a tablet. My mother nodded encouragingly from behind him, her eyes pleading with me to play along, to save the scene, to be the good girl one last time. I didn't reach for it with excitement. I reached for it with the caution of a bomb technician. I peeled back the silver paper. There was no velvet box inside. No Tiffany blue. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope with a legal seal. I opened the flap and slid the contents out onto the cold metal table. It wasn't a love letter. It was a contract. It's just some housekeeping for the wedding, Tyler said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. Just some asset protection stuff so we can merge our finances smoothly next month. I wanted to surprise you with financial security. I flipped past the first page, which was a standard benign prenuptial agreement cover sheet. I turned to page 4, then page 7. My eyes narrowed. Buried in the dense legalese of paragraph 12, section B, was a clause titled Irrevocable Proxy. I read the fine print. It granted Tyler full voting rights for my shares in Apex Logistics in the event of my incapacity or absence, and right below that, a durable power of attorney effective immediately upon signature. The room seemed to tilt. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. The isolation at the dark table. The endless glasses of champagne the waiter had tried to press on me earlier, which I had refused. The pressure to just relax and not worry about business. This wasn't a birthday party. It was a heist. Tyler hadn't invited me here to celebrate his launch. He had invited me here to get me drunk, keep me in the dark, and have me sign away control of my company under the guise of wedding paperwork. He wasn't just using me for logistics. He was planning a hostile takeover of my life's work. I looked up at him. The man I was supposed to marry wasn't looking at me with love. He was looking at me with the panic of a con artist whose mark just spotted the mirror. You didn't buy me a gift, I said, my voice barely a whisper, yet loud enough to silence the immediate vicinity. You bought yourself a company. I turned the document around and slid it across the table toward Marcus. Read paragraph 12, I said. He tried to steal my vote. Marcus put on his reading glasses. He read the clause. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The silence that stretched between us was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging in the air, waiting to drop. Marcus set the document down on the folding table with a sound that felt louder than a gunshot in the hushed room. He took off his glasses and folded them slowly, deliberately. The music had stopped. The dancers had frozen. My parents looked like they were watching a car crash in slow motion. Tyler opened his mouth to speak, to spin another lie, but Marcus held up a single hand. Unethical business practices, Marcus said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the lounge. Clause 4.1 of our investment agreement. Any attempt to defraud a partner, mislead a board member, or engage in predatory legal maneuvering constitutes an immediate breach. He looked at Tyler with disdain. You didn't just lose your logistics, son. You lost your funding. My firm is pulling out. Effective immediately. Tyler swayed on his feet. The color drained from his face until he looked like a corpse. You can't, he whispered. We launch tomorrow. The inventory is all ready. The inventory is grounded, Marcus interrupted. And, without my capital, you can't pay the release fees to get it moving again. It's over. My mother let out a strangled sob. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my blazer. Savannah, please fix this. Tell Marcus it was a misunderstanding. Tyler loves you. We all love you. You're our favorite girl. I looked down at her hand on my arm. The same hand that had steered me to the folding table. The same hand that had hidden my coat so I wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. Your favorite girl? I repeated, my voice soft but lethal. 10 minutes ago, I was an embarrassment. 10 minutes ago, I wasn't aesthetic enough to be seen. I pulled my arm away. My father stepped forward, his face red, blustering with impotent rage. You ungrateful little. After everything we've done for you, we let you be part of this family. You didn't let me be part of the family, I said, meeting his eyes. You let me pay for it. I turned to Tyler. He was staring at the floor, defeated, his arrogance stripped away to reveal the small, greedy man beneath. You didn't just lose a fleet, I told him, my voice steady. You lost the only person who knew how to save you. I picked up my clutch. I didn't look back at the folding table. I didn't look back at the gift box that was actually a trap. I walked past Marcus, giving him a small nod of gratitude. He tipped his head in return. I walked through the silent crowd past the VIP booths that now looked cheap and tawdry under the harsh lights. I walked out the front door of the Obsidian Lounge and into the cool night air. Behind me, I could hear the chaos starting, the shouting, the accusations, the sound of a dynasty crumbling into dust. But I didn't turn around. I had a company to run. The next morning, the sun hit my desk at 7 a.m., illuminating the dust motes dancing in the silence. It was the quietest my office had ever been. Usually the morning of a major client launch is a war room, phones ringing, dispatchers shouting, adrenaline spiking. Today there was only the hum of the server banks and the steam rising from my coffee. I looked at my monitors. The fleet was still grounded at the depot, 48 trucks sitting in neat idle rows. On my personal phone, the notifications were stacking up in a silent blocked folder, hundreds of desperate calls from my mother, furious texts from Brittany, and panic-stricken voicemails from Tyler. The news cycle had already picked up the story of the failed launch. Brooks Technology's stock was in freefall, plummeting 30% in pre-market trading. Without Marcus's backing and without a supply chain, Tyler wasn't a tech visionary anymore. He was just a guy with a warehouse full of plastic he couldn't move. I looked at the idle trucks. I could have left them there. I could have let the inventory rot in the containers, dragging out the lawsuit and bleeding Tyler dry until he was bankrupt. That would have been revenge. But revenge is just another form of attachment. It keeps you tied to the people you hate. I didn't want to be tied to them anymore. I wanted to be free. I pulled up the contact info for Project Horizon, a disaster relief nonprofit I had admired for years, but never had the excess capacity to support because I was too busy propping up my family. They had been trying to move emergency supplies to a flood-ravaged region 2 states over, but lacked the budget for a commercial fleet. I picked up the phone. This is Savannah from Apex, I told their director. I have 48 trucks and drivers ready to roll. I'm donating the entire logistics capacity. We can load your supplies by noon. The silence on the other end was stunned, followed by tears. Savannah, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. It's a write-off, I said, smiling for the first time in days. Consider it an investment in something real. As I authorized the new route, I thought about my family. For years, they had seemed so large, so powerful, so impossible to defy. But looking at the wreckage of their lives this morning, I realized they never actually had power. They only had the illusion of it sustained by my money and my labor. This is the illusion of the empty wallet people, who build their identity on status rather than character. Crumble the second the subsidy is cut. They were hollow structures, and I had finally stopped being the scaffolding. I watched the screen as the fleet status changed from grounded to active. The trucks weren't moving Tyler's ego anymore. They were moving hope. I took a sip of coffee. The weight in my chest was gone, replaced by a clean, quiet sense of purpose. I wasn't the engine for their dysfunction anymore. I was the driver of my own life. If you've ever had to remind someone that your kindness has a limit, hit that like button and share this story. Let's remind the world that self-respect is non-negotiable.